Hello and welcome. My name is Tom, and you're listening to episode 6 of the Ska Podcast. Or you're watching it, because if you're a Patreon member or YouTube channel supporter, then you get a video version. And we do have a video version for you today, which is also why I'm using this bright green windscreen on my microphone, which I got specifically for this podcast, because for some reason when I think of ska, bright green is a color that pops to mind, and I just figured, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Today I'm super excited because I have another guest, and wouldn't you guess that I didn't actually expect so many people to come on this show. Most of the episodes have not been just me, which is awesome. It's very different than other stuff that I do. And I've been having a lot of fun getting to know people and getting to know their stories and their experiences with this specific genre of music and music in general. And our guest today, I'm very, very excited to talk to. So this is somebody who I have known through like online communication for a while, for, channel comments, Instagram messages and stuff like that, Discord, all that good stuff. However, we've not actually talked, quote unquote, in person until right now. And so this is going to be, our chance to get to know each other. But just like when I talked about my experience going to that one Aquabats show at the Key Club 20 years ago, and it was like, as soon as you find people, you just feel like you click and things work. It's kind of the same thing in this case. So I'm very excited. I'm just going to jump into it. Our guest today is Chris Raub. Not two people, but one person with the first names of two people. So good morning, Chris.
Good morning. It's good to talk with you. I'm so excited to be here. And just to even jump right in, I was at that show too at the Key Club. Yes, which when you talked about that episode a couple episodes back, you're like, you meet people and things. I'm like, maybe we did. Who knows? I have no idea. But I was there too. That was my second Aquabats show.
That was my second. What was your first one?
So so that was part of in the preparation for this. I tried to look up when it was, and I can't find it. I went on like concert archives, or at least it's not like super specific. It was with Real Big Fish at the Hollywood Palladium. This was 1997. So this was just right before they released The Fury of the Aquabats. And K-Rock, that was the local radio. That is the local radio station. You talked about it as well. Kind of being able to hear that from afar, from where you lived. Of course, me being SoCal native, that was my radio station. They were putting it on, and Aquabats were the opener, and then it was Real Big Fish. And so that was kind of my first seeing of both of them live. And so when I looked it up, it shows that Real Big Fish played there, but it does not show that the Aquabats were with them. But they were the opener.
Yeah, that sounds about right. They wouldn't have been like on the bill at that point.
Right. I tried to find my ticket stubs because I've kept that stuff, and I spent weeks. And at some point, I just had to give up and go like, I know it happened, because that was my first kind of foray into like the whole spectacle that is the Aquabats. Of course, listening to them, but then like seeing them live and seeing, just like you said, all of the different things that happen on stage. And it even connected the dots once The Fury of the Aquabats came out. Like when they would do the thugs on the stage, that's when they played the fight song, which is in the album. So it's like when you're listening to that kind of on its own, you wonder like, okay, this is kind of interesting and funny. But when you put it together with like theatrics on stage, totally makes sense.
Absolutely. It's so cool. I have my old MacBook is off over here off screen, and I have a spreadsheet on there, which you just reminded me I need to save, because I made a spreadsheet of like every date, the venue, and the opening acts and stuff. And I need to like dig. So you would remember that at this show, the opener was Digital Unicorn, which was Prince Adam. And that was where I saw Theremin for the first time in my life, because he played the Theremin at one point. I bought one because of that. That was like my next big purchase musically, and it's right over here. And the crazy thing too is like something went wrong with it, and it didn't work for like 8 years. I don't know why. And recently, like a month ago, I just opened it up and just started just soldering stuff, like, I don't know. And it started working again. So now I have my working theremin back. So How crazy. So we're at the exact same, very, I didn't know that. My mind is like blown right now.
It's a small world, but it's not a small world type of thing. But especially when you think
Yeah.
about just how big it exploded in Southern California. So it wasn't just Orange County, and I'll talk probably about that in a little bit. But how far it extended, yes, it would have gone to all the way to Indio, to Burbank, California, where I was from. So that when there were big venues where these bands played, we all came from everywhere to them.
Yeah, yeah, and it's oh my gosh, that's just so crazy. And like speaking of India, which is my hometown now, the Aquabats. This is now just the Aquabats podcast, but they were dropped from Golden Voice Records in 1999, 1998 because the record company lost a whole bunch of money because they wanted to put on this music festival out in the middle of the desert, and it was like, who would want to go to a music festival in the middle of the desert in this like at these, near this Coachella Valley thing, and they lost a whole bunch of money and then dropped the Aquabats, and they lost their record deal because of Coachella.
Is that when they went to Horchata at that
Yeah.
point?
I don't, that's like, I don't know if that's like, if that was like a real label or just their thing. I'm always like, because it's always like they're so good at
funny to where that, yeah, that could definitely be something that was made up by the back commander or something like
because
that.
it's clearly Parker Jacobs' artwork. So I was always like, is this your thing or not? But then it became a real thing, and then eventually they were on Nitro Records, and then Nitro went out of business, and now they're just like, I think they're just doing their own,
And the self
which makes sense.
Well, this day and age, you can do that with anything, any type of technology, any prosumer. Of course, those guys are pros. Can put stuff out with the equipment that we all have nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so crazy. So that actually brings me to a good point. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are, what you do, where you're at? Like,
Sure.
let us get to know Chris Raub.
Well, I'm just a little bit older than you, so I'm about 5 years older, and I think that's where it's neat to hear our ska journeys, because while we listened and liked a lot of the same bands, a lot of some of the things that I experienced was just right before you, and
Right.
because of it, certain things are a little bit different. But as far as right now, I'm married. I've got 5 kids. We're pretty crazy that we have that many. It's a chaotic household, to be sure, but lots of fun. Live in Southern California still. I was a music teacher for about 10 years. That was what I went to school for, and got a bunch of degrees in music and things like that. So that's a lot of my background. Nowadays, I work as a corporate trainer for, I'll just say, a fruit company. That's all I'm really supposed to say when I'm doing things like this. You can fill in the blanks for a technology fruit company that we might be using some of their stuff today. That's kind of what my day job is. But yeah, so I started out playing the saxophone at the age of 5. So that was my main instrument. That came from kind of a little side story, watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He had like one of those little tapes come from Mr. McFeely, who was the mailman, and it was a tape to show a factory on how they made instruments, and it showed how they made a saxophone. I was probably like 3 years old, maybe 4, and at that point, I had told my mom that, like, I want to play that. I want to play the saxophone. So the next year, once I started in kindergarten, I went to a private school, a very small private school, but they even started band stuff for elementary students. So I started playing saxophone at 5. Probably not well, but I started it then.
That's crazy though, because I remember watching a Mr. Rogers segment where they went to an instrument factory, but it was trumpets, and I thought it was like a super cool. Those were always like my favorite parts of that show. But it's just so funny. I didn't start playing the trumpet after that, but it was probably the same thing. I was like 3-4 years old watching this thing, and it was the coolest thing. This, like, there's keys and there's whatever, and it's metal and it's shiny, and of course, it always ends with someone playing it really well.
Playing it.
Like,
They pull it off the line and someone plays it. Yeah, absolutely.
Super funny.
So,
anyway,
yeah. So I did that throughout my formative years into high school. Was at a part of a very, very large music program in high school. Huge marching band, where I was in marching band during the fall season, and then in the spring season we did like jazz band and like concert band, classical type stuff. But kind of concurrently with that, I started playing the guitar at age 10. just because I started to get into rock music. And so your like band that like changed you, which was the Aquabats, for me, that was not a ska band. It was Pearl Jam, because that was kind of who came out in the early 90s. And that's where I was able to kind of take something that was mine. I have a sister that's 9 years older than me. So I had been listening to music kind of since I was younger because she was so much older, but that was always her music. And that was the music from the 80s, things like Depeche Mode or even Devo or, you know, Guns N' Roses, things like that. But that was always her music. And so this was finally something that I could identify as mine. So I was living in kind of this like dual world from like the middle school into high school of I like rock music because I like playing that and I'm liking that I'm learning the guitar, but I also really love playing the saxophone. And then entered 1995 for me in high school. So that was my sophomore year in high school. And I had a fellow friend in band who played the saxophone. He was listening to something, and I saw the CD case because he had a compact CD, you know, a Discman. You know, that was what it was back in the for the TikTok crowd out there. You know, we got a compact disc player, and it was the album "Question the Answers" from the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. And I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "You don't know who the Mighty Mighty Bosstones are?" And I said, "I don't." And he handed it to me, and he said, "This is yours," which I thought also was kind of odd. He goes, "You don't even need to borrow it. You need to have this. So just take this and listen to this." And what he ended up doing, like in another period throughout that day, he said, "I don't want you to listen to it from top to bottom." He changed the order. He said, "I want you to listen to this song first, and then this, followed by this." And so I went home that day and did, and it was just like, oh my gosh, the world, my two worlds can be combined because they were more, you know, they call themselves ska core, of course. They're a little more edgier than like kind of lighthearted Aquabats, Real Big Fish, things like that. So I'm getting my rock fix, but at the same time, I'm hearing this saxophone just kind of blaring right through the chorus, or lots of times on the you know, a little counter melody within the verses. And I was like, this is just absolutely amazing. And very much like you, I think you said you went to the warehouse when you
Oh yeah,
when you
where
went to
the
get
warehouse?
where the warehouse. Yes, yes, the warehouse. And I went there and I had to get all of the other albums, which at that point was Ska Core, The Devil and More, Don't Know How to Party, and I think one other, and was just kind of totally immersed in that. So that was really my first intro into ska music, was the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. A little bit later, then it was kind of some of the early stuff of No Doubt, which I feel like that's a touchy topic for a lot of people, whether or not
I can
No
feel your
Doubt
hesitation to be like, no, it's okay.
or not. I'm always hesitant to, because of the fact that when they were really at the height of their popularity, the horn players went bye-bye.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a whole other debate, maybe at some point. Because that's hard for lots of ska bands, whether, you know, as they moved in, you know, even with the Aquabats, was shifting kind of their having to change into kind of some new wave sound. It was more with the keyboards and the synthesizers, and kind of the horn players went. And other bands have kept them, and so who knows what's obviously the best solutions out there, but yes, some early No Doubt where they did have the horn players still.
Oh yeah,
But
great stuff. Oh my god, there's good stuff in there.
So that was kind of my intro into it. But really, where things kind of shifted gears was in my junior year of high school. That's where I think a lot of people discovered that wanted to do the classic, you know, high school garage band, that, hey, all these horn players in band, like we want you over here because we want to do this ska thing, and so we need some horn players. And this thing that was seemingly uncool or geeky, you know, the term the band geek, well, now we are being desired by the people who are like the rock cool kids, so to speak. And it was just a very, very interesting time when different members of the band would be plucked out to play in a local band over here, a local band over here. And most of them didn't kind of amount to much, as most cities probably did, with kind of
Right,
with the amateur ska scenes. But I joined a ska band, and we were called Nothing Special, and it was comprised of the best musicians from our choir organization at school, which was kind of like the guitar players, the bass players, the drummers, the singers that would accompany our big choir program, and kind of the best of the instrumental program, which was what I was in. It was a 2 sax players and 2 trumpet players, and we formed a ska band. And that was really cool because at that point, as ska was starting to move from Orange County up to SoCal, it really didn't hit until that 97 year. There was a couple years where we were hearing it, and K-Rock was playing a little bit of it, but these bands were not coming up to play in SoCal. It just wasn't happening yet, or at least from my purview, when we would try to search for bands at local venues, it just wasn't happening yet. So we're wanting them to come up, and it just wasn't quite happening yet. So we would do our own thing, and so then coincidentally, as they started to come up to play some of the smaller venues, even though they're pretty big, like the Roxy, the Whiskey on Sunset, the Viper Room, the Key Club, the Troubadour, that would mean that they would have some ska nights where they were the main headliner, but they wanted some ska bands to be the openers. Enter Nothing Special and people like us, where we signed up and said we would love to do it. We had to, of course, create demo tapes and things like the demo tapes, not CDs yet, demo tapes. They wanted to see our tape, and it's like, gosh, such a
so
change
different.
can happen within 10 years from like 95 to 2005. Because I know a lot of what you experienced was in the early 2000s, correct?
Yeah. That was I think I listened to my first Aquabats song in the year 2000, and so everything kind of from there is what it solidified. Because late 90s for me were a lot of like new metal, because that was thing. But also like there was always the Offspring were always in there, and so they kind of like had that sort of like a lot more of like fun songs, I guess, at least compared to like Limp Bizkit and stuff. And then ironically, although it wasn't ironic at the time, my best friend got like several Smash Mouth CDs, and I was like, oh, these are super cool. And I like, this is before it became like a meme or whatever to, like Smash Mouth. I was like, this is just like super fun, upbeat songs about walking on the sun and all this kind of stuff. And so that was like, yeah, but it never occurred to me that like, oh, you really enjoy listening to this kind of music, you should actively seek it out instead of just, listening to whatever happens to pop up because it's what is popular in the moment. And I don't know why it took me like years to get to that point. Whatever. I was young and ignorant.
Side note, as I'm looking at our microphones, I know you said that this green represents ska, but really because I have the black one, you really should have a white a white
You know what? You're
cover
100%
on
right. I'm looking around like I have one. I do not have a white windscreen.
Tell me.
I need to
You
order
have the white
this.
one?
I don't. I need to order it now.
Okay.
I need to go to reporterstore.com.
I was about to say reporterstore.com. You've been saying it. I was going to get the green one because you had the blue and the purple. I'm like, well, I can't do that. And Doc Rock has the purple, so I can't do that. And so I was going to do the green. And did you just go to their website and buy every like color from the colors?
I should, just for the
sure.
environmental impact of like not shipping all these things, but it's like, I'll get the blue one. The blue one's cool. Heather needs a purple one. Let's get the purple one. Now I want the green one. It's like, I just need to go and get the rest of them, because I know that's going to happen.
Dark blue. I want the dark blue.
Okay, I'll keep a light blue, which also like you could have the same color as me. I promise it's okay.
I know. I know. I'm just messing with you, but yeah. So that was a little of kind of what ended up happening. And as we started playing more, we started to get asked back to play for certain things when different of these up and coming bands came into town. And so a lot of our playing for opening bands was really two primary ones. We did a couple non big names, but the Hippos, that was a one that we
love the Hippos.
Yeah, that we would open for, and the Mad Caddies, and that was just a lot of fun. Mad Caddies are a little aggressive as far as like their backstage antics. We'll just kind of leave it at that.
Okay.
For a young impressionable 17-year-old, that was a little a lot for me. The Hippos were just about a year older than us. They were just out of high school. And that's where we started to develop a little bit of a friendship with them, primarily with their drummer, Kyle Briggs, who lived in Burbank, where we grew up, where all of us lived. And that's where we kind of made the connection. And he said, I have a little recording studio in like my little garage. And we decided to record some stuff with him, and that we made some connections with that. And that was just super fun to do that. And I was looking for that as well. Sadly, I it's so sad as I've gotten older, all of my memorabilia that I know I've kept, I now just can't find anywhere. And somehow I don't, from MacBook to MacBook, I somehow did not move over like the digital copies. I was like, oh, I'll bring some of our stuff in. And of course I can't find that stuff anywhere, but such as it is. But
Well, it just means I
just
have to
really,
come back and showcase like
so
stuff like that.
it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm reaching off screen here because yesterday I had this little Focusrite Scarlett audio interface here, and I on my personal podcast this week, my guest was Luis Vega, who has a YouTube channel called Mr. Camera Junkie and stuff, and he talked about he was into video and cameras in like the year 2000, and then basically just took a break until like 2018, 2017, and jumped back into it and was like, oh my God, everything is like amazing now. And when it comes to recording music, I was big into it in high school as a kid, like around the time of those shows. And I, everything from taking tape players and putting like a little Radio Shack microphone up to like a speaker somewhere. My first instrument was a bass that I bought at a pawn shop, and I bought it like on a whim. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to plug this into. So I had like an old stereo speaker that I somehow plugged into like a video audio mixer that I borrowed from my grandpa, and like plugged it into the speaker, and I could hear the bass in there, and like it worked, it worked. And eventually I got to the point where I had like, must have been one of the first USB audio interfaces. It was like this big chunky thing, and it was like super heavy and metal, but you could plug in, your guitar and record into like GarageBand 1 or whatever. And that was kind of it. And like, I haven't done any music. And then just recently I got this little Focusrite, which has a nice 1/4-inch thing right there. So you plug your instrument right in. And then Logic Pro, I've been dipping into. This podcast is my excuse to learn Logic.
Very cool. That's very cool.
It's kind of amazing. And just yesterday, I was literally like just hanging out here like, okay, here's a drum track, here's guitar, here's bass, just noodling around, nothing crazy. And I was like, this sounds so good. Like if I knew what I were doing, or I put more than 15 minutes of effort, this would be a legit recording that I could create just right here. And then, Heather walked in, and I was like, listen to this. And she was like, oh, I thought that was a song. I was like, no, I just did that right now. So when you guys talk about like, yeah, you have to find someone who has a recording studio and has the equipment, and
that's what had to happen.
That's so different than just like, this was $140.
Right.
and you're done. Logic isn't free, but
right. And if you wanted to, you could record a whole band using that and just do things piece by piece with just that 2-track right there, Focusrite. You could record an amplifier, one microphone up, one direct, or some overheads over drums if you just wanted that. There's so many different ways with just that. But then, and we did it, by the way, also it was on 2-inch reel to reel. He had a little reel to reel. We weren't going digital yet.
This is like that thing you do over here.
Weren't going digital yet, not going yet. So, we got that, and we had to take it somewhere to make CDs and make cassettes and things, and we had to press our own, and which lots of people had to do. So I think that was just kind of a really neat thing. The other thing I really wanted to share, as you were talking about, I don't remember which episode it was, but how you said you went on to like the Aquabats website or like their chat board or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, and at that point I was in college and still trying to listen as much as I could to any type of music, especially ska, but wasn't as invested as I was in my late teens in the late 90s. And what we had to do then, because I almost laughed out loud when I was listening to the episode, in order for me to contact them in the CD liner notes, they had a PO box where you could send, and tons of the bands did this. A lot of them from Asian Man Records. So a lot of the bands off of that, anything that was produced by Asian Man Records, in addition to the CD liners, there'd be a little piece of paper slipped in, and it would be a PO box where if you sent in like $10, they'll, in 4 to 6 weeks, send you back a whole bunch of swag, like some stickers or different things like that. And that's what I had to do for Real Big Fish and for the Aquabats and for Less Than Jake. And I grew up in a youth group at a church. And so we listened a lot to Supertones and 5 Iron Frenzy and all of those, and that's what we had to do for years, which I just blows my mind. I show my kids that, and they think I'm just the oldest man in the world that I had to do something like that. I couldn't send an email yet, but so that's where, I have my little other camera angle here. It's not really quite showing some of it, but like these are all my stickers from all of those years that I kept. I never stuck them on anything because I wanted to hang on to them. So I got a bunch of things from the Aquabats. I also got a letter, which I can't find. And it was and Jimmy, because I wrote to them and to the Aquabats and said that I played the saxophone. Jimmy the robot was the one that like said, "Hey, thanks for supporting us. Just a little piece of paper, like some chicken scratch. And here's some stickers and stuff." And I just thought that was like the coolest thing ever. Just to even get it from
makes
that.
Me like him even more.
Yeah.
We need to do an episode that's just like cool merch and cool like that kind of stuff. Because I have like down in this little cabinet back here, I have my Aquabats stress ball, which is still in its original little box packaging. That's cool. But it's funny, when you were saying that, I couldn't remember what the message board was, but now I remember. Eventually the Aquabats had their own message board, but for a long time they were on interpunk.com, I think was the website. And the cool thing there was it was just a message board and each band had its own forum. So the Aquabats was the one I visited, but you could venture out into other bands' things and kind of see the vibes there. But what the Aquabats were doing was you could be an Aqua Cadet. I don't know if you...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was the start of that. And I got a patch to like put on. I put it on my backpack. And of course I'm so mad that like it was like many backpacks in high school that probably wore out and I threw it away and didn't take the patch off. But
I still have my patch. I've never put it on anything. I don't know what to do with it. It's been like 20 years or whatever. And I'm like, I'll find a spot for it. But that was a thing where it was like, hey, if you want to be a cadet, like send you $5 or whatever. And you needed to send a photo so they can make your ID card.
Yes, I had that ID card too.
You got the little laminated thing. It just had your name written on it. And your cadet ID number and stuff. And it's funny, I didn't have a photo because the time that it wasn't like, yeah. So I took my school ID and I cut, because a school ID was just like a laminated thing with a photo. So I just cut the photo out of that and sent in. I was like, this is a perfect size for things. So I sent in my school ID and then I was like, I don't have anything on my school ID. So then I cut out, I guess I must have printed, or maybe I took it out of a CD booklet. It was the Bat Commander's head that was like the right size, and I put that on my school ID, which never was a problem until one day I was going into campus, and I don't know why, like suddenly we had like police doing drug checks, which I was never in trouble. I never did anything never anything like that ever. And I was just walking into school one day, and I just heard them like over the radio go like, "Guy in the blue hoodie," and I was like, huh? And they like grabbed me and threw me into this room, and they were like, "Open up your bag." And I was like, what is happening? Like, it's a random search. And I was like, okay, like here's my backpack with nothing interesting in it. And they're like, "Let me see your ID." I was like, sure. And I handed him that one, and he's like, "What is this?" And I was like,
with like blacked out tooth as well.
Yeah, it was full goggles, helmet, blacked out tooth. It was like one of the it was like the Floating Eye Myths and Legends era, like a promo photo or something. And I was like, I don't know how to explain this, but I like mutilated my ID card. And then I tried to like pull out my Aquabats ID to go like, here's the photo that was there. Like, I promise it's me. And anyway, that's the time that it came and bit me in the butt, but still worth it. Still proudly have my Aquabats ID.
You were probably doing the search for that guy that sat next to you in class that said he was going to murder you or something. So they
stab somebody. Yep. Oh my God. Yeah. That was like the same school year.
By association.
Wow. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, it's just, the whole thing is crazy. And then you were posting a thing, I think it was on Discord the other day, because this past week has been, when we're recording this, it's been a crazy anniversary week of like albums and stuff. And so you were posting, I think you posted, was it Mad Caddies had 23-year anniversary? Yeah, and Real Big Fish Turned the Radio Off turned 25.
Yep, 25, and Duck and Cover was 23. And then a couple weeks before that, the Return of the Aquabats was their anniversary as well. I think you had posted that. Which by the way, to call back, there's so many things I like kind of took mental notes from your previous episode, where I was like, oh, I too thought that was absolutely hilarious. I fell for searching at the warehouse for the first album of the Aquabats.
The debut of the Aquabats.
This is the return. This can't be it. That's such a perfect like bait and switch. I just love that. That's super funny.
It's funny too because like it's when you think of when it came out in 1995 and even years later when I was finding it, there wasn't like, let me pull out my phone and just like, what's the first Aquabats album? So it's literally like you're going by the copyright dates and you're going by the titles and I was even trying to piece together like, well, the graphics on the Fury are better than the graphics on this, so it seems like it's newer. Like you're trying to Sherlock Holmes deduce everything to just figure out like what's the first album, and the guy at the warehouse, had no idea what I was looking at over here.
And so for me, being helpful. What I without trying to sound egotistical, even at that point, I had a very seasoned ear to sounds. I could tell, I'm like, well, but this album sounds not as produced as the Fury of the Aquabats. It sounds older. It sounds like something that would have been done kind of indie, and the horns aren't as predominant, and there's not a good mix sometimes in certain songs. I still love the album, but
it's definitely rough though.
Right. It's because it's their first. And so that was throwing me off as well. So that was super hilarious. In addition, is the name of this podcast. I love the Ska Podcast, a podcast about ska. Just to be clear. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. You struck gold with that one.
Thankfully, can you believe that domain was not taken? So now I guess what was super interesting is a couple weeks ago when I had Mike on and we were talking about the history of ska, is he was then going into like what he likes now and new stuff and everything. And I know, feel free to bring in other musical tastes and stuff, but what are some things that have stuck around, like in terms of your favorite bands, artists, whatever, that are still like in your regular rotation, even as a father of five, Apple, fruit company. I'm using an Apple computer. This is irrelevant.
It's probably fine. It's my brain goes to like my the business contact training I have to do, and like what things like bleed into what like considers Apple proprietary, and I don't think Apple's looking to get into.
We just talked about how great Logic is, so
right. Which that's where I was curious why you were using Adobe Audition. I'm like, he knows Final Cut. Why is he not using Logic?
Well, the reason for that was because I had used GarageBand. That was my back in my like pre-Apple days, using a PC, like whatever hand-me-down thing I had. I think I was using Cakewalk, was like in high school what I was recording on, and it worked, and it worked really well. And then finally I got a Mac and it had GarageBand, and I was like, oh my god, thank you, like this is so easy. But when it came time to doing podcasts and things, GarageBand doesn't have just a labeled like broadcast meter so you can see how loud things are. It's just the color-coded green, yellow, red. I was like, I want to make sure everything is coming in at like -16 and real specific. That's one of the many benefits of Logic, is you get that plus,
-16 LUFS, yeah.
plus everything else. But and then I've been using Final Cut, but I just also have the Adobe Creative Cloud. And several years ago, I was working with some students to like do some training at a radio station for a thing they were like an event they were doing. And the radio station was teaching them how to do everything on Audition. And I was like, oh, this is pretty sweet. And Audition's really geared nicely towards voice. And it is actually like, it's kind of nice to do spoken word editing on Audition. But I've been wanting to do Logic because I don't remember what the heck stream or podcast I talked about, so I'm sorry if there's a repeat, but one thing I've been wanting to do is I'm not good at writing songs, but I'm good at writing riffs. I think it was maybe Patrick and I talked about this. And I wanted to, at the end of my YouTube videos, you have 20 seconds to put up your subscribe button and next videos and things. And I was like, I would love to just make a bunch of 20-second little riffs in different styles and different whatevers and just record my own thing just as practice of like recording and mixing and all this kind of stuff. And I want to do that in Logic because I want to know Logic, because Mike and I talked about Ska Tune Network and Jeremy and everything, and you can go on and watch these live streams where Jeremy's like mixing an entire song in Logic with like a bajillion tracks. And
Right.
oh my God, I'm just like, this is so cool. I
It's
want to see
nuts.
that.
It's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm at the point now in Logic where every time I need to do something, I have to go to Google and go like, how to change the tempo,
Sure.
how to do this, how
Right.
to do whatever. And I'm like, oh, which
There
is
will be a
just
learning
the
curve,
growing
of
pains.
course. I get it.
But it's really fun though. And yesterday, let me tell you, like how awesomely easy it was to like produce a really good sounding thing, where just my playing was the weak part, but not the actual recording quality. Oh my God,
And what did you record? What instrumentation did you? Just drums, or was it?
It was electric drums and then guitar and bass, like actual guitar and bass. Because I've been, what's been really cool lately, this is ska adjacent, is Mark Hoppus has been doing these live streams where he's just playing like Blink-182 songs on his bass, just sitting at his computer, just playing. And it's really cool because it sounds really good. He talks about him, but the coolest part is you can just see exactly how he's playing everything. And so all this stuff I've been trying to piece, everything I've been trying to piece together for years, I can just watch him play it and go like, oh my God, this is exactly how to play that thing. And so he's been my bass teacher for the past like 4 months. But then I've been really getting into like, you know, every time you learn a new thing on an instrument, it's like it rekindles the excitement for that instrument again. And so I've been wanting to do bass and record bass, and I can actually record bass that doesn't just sound like a weird, like a no definition thing. Like I can
right.
get
Can have
like
some
that.
clarity to it.
Yeah,
Right.
and especially
Sure.
that, I don't know. I like to use a pick on the bass. Say what you will, but I like that sound, that bright, like I don't know. I like that sound, and I can make that happen now just with this little red box right here, which is so cool. Do you still do music? Do you still play music and stuff?
I do on occasion. I still have my son now, which is really super cool. My oldest son, who's 15, he just started high school today. Today was day one, so everyone's out back to school, and this is their first day back in, since pandemic stuff. So everyone's in school, which is great. But he has my saxophone. He's now playing it, so I kind of like that it was bequeathed to him. I feel very kind of special about that. That's something that he can do now, and so he's taken an interest, and so I'm starting to play him some of those things. So maybe I'll kind of tie a little bit of that in with your question of what are some of the things you still listen to. I think what has stood out to me, kind of the test of time, isn't necessarily a certain band, but a certain album, and like how well the horn stood out. As a horn player, first and foremost, before I was a guitar player, and I was a bass player as well. That's actually the instrument I studied in college. No picks, but that's okay.
That explains your expression when I said that.
Biting with a lip. I was like, but I get it because that's what Mark does. That's also what bass player and Less Than Jake. You know, he's pick heavy. I get it. Like it has a distinct sound, and so it totally get it. But I could tell the bands who had really skilled horn players, and which ones had marginally skilled horn players. And definitely, Aquabats, Real Big Fish, Mad Caddies. I'm going to just use actually Mighty Body Boss Tones. There's several others as well, but these guys were just so in tune, because that's where some of my frustration came throughout the years listening to certain ska bands. I would listen and go like, these guitars and stuff and the drums are all spot on, and I'm hearing like these harmonies with these horn players, and it's a little out of tune. And that was always like a point of contention for me. I'm like, oh, this is and what really shifted was the first time that we played for the Mad Caddies, and they just have at least back at the when with Duck and Cover and the album prior to that, it was just one trumpet player, one trombone player, just two of them. And when we got there, they were already warming up. They had with them on their tour a horn coach who was there doing warm-ups with them, doing like licks here and there, and he had a little stick that he would just like tap on a something to like keep them in time. And now I want you to do this, and I want you to get higher. I want you crescendo. And nope, you're a little out there. You need to pull out on this part of the trumpet, and you're a little you're a little flat, you're a little sharp, and we'll adjust them. And the the massive sound that these two horn players could produce was 10 times louder than the four of us in my band could ever produce. And I was like,
How
wow,
crazy.
these guys are amazing. And if you've not heard Duck and Cover, if you're listening to this podcast, the first song on it, it's just horn heavy right out the get-go. It just like blasts you. And then it goes into like the the ska, with the guitar later, but it's so horns at the beginning, that's the kind of stuff that stood out to me. So kind of tying that into with my son, who's starting to become his own sax player and trying to find things that stand out. I feel like my job as his dad and as someone who knows stuff is to find him things where he can hear that horn line or that sax line, that wonderful sax riff in Attacked by Snakes at the end, and go like, learn that, like just like you're doing with Mark Hoppus, like in the bass lines, like here's a song and like,
Yeah.
if you can figure that out, with the six, are there any more, whatever it is below there, like the sax is playing underneath it. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. That one stands out, and then the one in my skateboard, like right before the second verse stands out. Just as like it's so
little solo.
it's so good. There were man, I guess one of the things too, like not to make it just all about the Aquabats, but around the time I started seeing them live was right around the time that like they were not having as many horns. My first Aquabats concert was the first show they played without Catboy, who was their, one of their trumpet players. Luckily, I've since been able to see him many times perform with them. But so he was gone, and it was Jimmy on sax, and then Prince Adam was there to do trumpet, but Adam was also doing synthesizer and guitar. And so it was like, you kind of never knew whenever you saw them, like, is Martian Girl going to be on synthesizer, or is it going to be on horns this time? Or is it going to be synth and saxophone? But there was a period of time where Jimmy was taking over everything. And so everything that would normally be trumpets and stuff was all done on the sax. And it was so cool to hear these songs that I was super familiar with, but in a different way, like Plato entirely on saxophone or Super Rad only on the sax. It was like, it wasn't disappointing. Like you would think, oh, it's not as complete. It was like, this is just, it sounds so different. It sounds so cool. I loved it. It was amazing. And I was having a thought when you were talking about the saxophone in your son. I can't remember what it was, but it doesn't.
Was it from
matter.
Attack by Snakes?
No, I think I went on a tangent because my thought process got attacked by snakes there really quick. But just the idea of the musicianship, because when you were talking about Mad Caddies and being that serious about it, I remember the first time that I saw Suburban Legends live, because it was their full band, like back, it must have been 2004. And so it was 2 trumpets and 2 trombones, but the way they play, everybody's like, it's kind of like front and center. So you had,
everyone's just this wall.
It's a wall of people. Yeah. And it was like, Tim was on vocals right there. And then like, it was basically Tim and then surrounded by horns, and then like guitar and bass, and everybody were like almost behind the horns. And I remember like the curtain going up, and I think they started with Up All Night, which it's like heavy trombone intro and trumpet intro, and it was just like the wall went up. I was like in the front, and they were just right there, and it was just like so like you could feel it like moving your chest cavity, and it was just, I hadn't felt that like power from like a horn section at a show yet at that point, and it was really cool.
Yeah, that's a whole separate that could be a whole separate other podcast where I found it interesting as we moved into, past third wave ska, where some of the horns left. And when you think about non-ska groups, if you move back to, let's say, like Chicago or Earth, Wind and Fire, they've never changed their sound to where like, well, let's keep the rock part of it that people that has never left, through the decades of guitar, bass, and drums, and let's just move those horn players away. But it has a little bit happened to survive because ska kind of got a bad rap as a fad, and you and I know that that's not true at all. But I think there was a stigma then if you had a horn player or multiple within your band, which is just kind of a little unfortunate at times, you know. And so it's nice to see, like you said, with some of these, like the Back to the Beach, where they're bringing the horn players back, because you got all these people that are older now that can afford the tickets and are going to show up at these things. Like, we want to hear the sound that we grew up with, and it's super cool to see that when that happens.
Well, it seems like there's also been this thing too where because talking to Patrick and you having played music, you know, one of my regrets is like I don't like have live band experience, but you know, Patrick was talking about it's just the practicality of having 7 or 8 people in a band is difficult because you're trying to not only share the duties, but then literally you're not getting any cuts of money or any, like you're not earning anything from shows, and there's lots of personnel.
A lot easier to split the ticket between 3 people in Blink-182 than 8 people in the Aquabats.
Yeah, and when people then need, you know, people start having families, people have career things. I do remember my first Aquabats concert that I talked about. It was one at UC Riverside. Afterwards, when we were meeting them, the people like in front of us, they were talking to Crash, the bass player, and they were like, I guess they must have known him, and he was like, hey, like, what's up, guys? And they're like, how you doing? And they asked him like, how's work going? And I remember he said, oh, I had to go today, it sucked. I was like, oh. I think he was working as like an electrician or something at the time. Like I was like, oh, you were at work earlier today, like this is not your full-time thing. And that's tough, and so it's hard to keep a band with that many people going for that long. But it also seems like as time went on and things kind of settled down, that's when you see people then coming back, where it's like it almost seems like anytime the Aquabats play in Southern California, a bunch of the old horn players come back because they live there, and it's just like we can't go on tour, but like we'll go out and play at the OC Fair or whatever, you know.
That's totally true. There is like it's this wave, and even that happened with me, where at once I got married and started to have kids, and you know, just kind of immersed in young parenthood and job and stuff, things do get kind of pushed to the side a little bit, and you have to, for your own sanity at times, have to revisit those things that you felt passionate about. But it's easy to kind of get swept up in the new things at times, to where things did fade away for a period of time. And that's where, when I initially reached out to you, I think the love again for ska really returned in the mid to late 2000s, when my kids are now toddlers, and lo and behold, we're watching Nickelodeon, and I go like, wait, what? I know that guy. Like that's MC Bat Commander. And my wife's like, who? And I'm like, from the Aquabats. And again, she says, who? And I went like, this is something from, we went to separate high schools. She did not know my ska stuff. And I had to kind of explain to her. And I said, like, I guess, and I'm trying, and we didn't have, I don't think Wikipedia was there yet, but while of course we had the internet, the searching for stuff and finding it right at your fingertips, I'm not sure it took some research to figure out, like, is this really what's going on? Like, they've created Yo Gabba Gabba on Nickelodeon, then sure enough it was.
I can't imagine, because I was so obsessive with the Aquabats that I was always like, I knew when they
always
did like
the pipeline, right?
Yeah, I was in college watching the first episode by myself. I'm pulling up IMDb right now, actually, because I'm going to the Yo Gabba Gabba
from what's his name from the Lord of the Rings. What was
Elijah
the guest?
Wood was in the first.
Elijah
one.
Wood doing Dancey Dance.
Yeah,
which was just, my kid. It warmed my heart, because once he started doing Dancey Dance, my 2 oldest kids at the time were probably, I think they were, 3 and 1 or something. They're like crawling up and trying to do the Dancey Dance with Elijah Wood and Broby and Fufa, and I was just like, so crazy. My gosh, like mind is blown. And like I probably even cried a little bit, where I was just like, my world is now infiltrating again into my new world, just so crazy. So much so, and I sent you the picture that several years later, for for Halloween, I dressed up all 5 of my kids as the 5 characters from Yo Gabba Gabba, and instead of a tall black man, I was a short white guy being DJ Lance Rock. And
that was what won me, because you sent me this really nice message. That was like the thing, and I saw the photo, I was like, he's legit.
If I'm going to dress as DJ Lance Rock, yes, you know that I'm legit. It's not just words on it.
Brad Pitt dressed as DJ Lance once. That was like his Halloween costume one year, and I was like, this is weird because this is. What I was looking at is on
time that his kids were that age too. That's probably where
which was so great because it's like, you know, there's a lot of reasons it's a good kids show, but also just the kind of cool part of like, here we're gonna teach you how to skateboard. That's cool. But Tony Hawk is the one. But the 3-year-old doesn't know or care, but the parents sure do. Like it's a really cool thing, and that's one thing that I've loved, like talking about the people you admire being decent people, is you saw as soon as that show showed up and had success, and there you could go to Target and buy merchandise, and they're doing live performances. It was a very successful show. You then saw like all of the Aquabats who were working on it then bringing in all of the other people, so it was like that the wealth got spread around, you know, as much as possible, and everybody was trying to get a platform. But the thing I was looking up on IMDb was I wanted to see if this was still the case, and it's not. There are 7 trivia items for Yo Gabba Gabba. 2 of them are mine, posted when the show premiered in like 2007. But for like 8 years, there were only 2 trivia items, and they were both mine. So I was very happy about that.
Does it say, like, have you signed it? Like it shows that it's you?
No, it's just the top 2. It's some of the ones that talk about, it's the Aquabats related ones. So it's one of them talking about how the characters are like cuter versions of the villains that used to play with the Aquabats, and then there's one about Adam, who voices Muno, was also in the Aquabats. So those are the 2 facts that are related to the Aquabats came from me. I was just like, I need to share this knowledge. But for years, those are the only 2 trivia facts on there, and I was so proud of that.
Which 2 are yours? I'm looking at it right now. With the
it should be the top 2. There's only 2 that mention the Aquabats, and it should be mine.
One with Muno and Roby, and then the one for Adam. Gotcha.
Yep, those are mine.
There you go.
It doesn't have the date though of when I posted those. So funny. But yeah, what
I love about that as well is I which makes just just all the guys in the Aquabats. I think why you gravitate to them, why people gravitate to them, anyone, myself included, why they're so likable is that they're just being like themselves at the core. And you mentioned that on a previous podcast as well, that I think you said something like any band is wearing a costume, whether it's, you know, the leather jacket or something like that, and they're just choosing to be themselves. And that if you want to if anyone wanted to find a manifesto for who the Aquabats are, it is the song Play-Doh. It's everything in it. It's when I was a boy, I used to live in corduroy, Opie shirts, which I wore too, and slip-on Vans, which I wore too, the checkered Vans. That was like the my clothes of my youth in the 80s. And so when I heard that, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he says, my life is so simple. It was made up of these plans. Ride my bike to Thrifties. I'm like, I went down to Thrifties and rode my bike every day and got chocolate malted ice cream. I'm like, who is this man who is talking to me about myself? This is bizarre to me.
Yeah, and reading Christmas catalogs, the whole thing.
Right. And then just talking about the whole ethos of 70s Saturday morning cartoons. And so then what did he do as an adult? He created the new version of a Saturday morning cartoon that has so many throwbacks to the 70s Saturday morning cartoons. And then even the song played, or even other songs that the Aquabats do there, they if you were to listen to the theme song to Underdog from that was a cartoon, or you know, Captain Caveman or Grape Ape, like there's so many things that the Aquabats do that sound just like that. And it's an homage. It's not, you know, necessarily copying it. It's saying like, this is who we are. And so that's all they do, is always infuse who they are, from whether it was from their childhood or to adulthood. But you can see that in every facet, from the Aquabats, stage shows to Yo Gabba Gabba. So and there's my box.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Play-Doh is my favorite Aquabat song, hands down. And the thing about that, especially like in high school when I like heard it for the first, I guess it was then when I heard it for the first time, was something about that song really stood out, because it does have the like, here's childhood, here's where things are, but it's also like the kind of like, where did it go? I want to go back. But to me, it has the like, or at least with just what they were doing as a band, it was not just sitting there going like, oh, I miss it, but it was, if that's what I miss, then that's what I have to make right now. Like it's up to me to bring those feelings back and to bring that stuff back. And that was a really cool, like empowering turning point of, oh, I don't have to wait. I can just do the thing. And that's what that song is very, very big on me because of that specifically.
And whether it's personally or on stage, what do they do when they're on stage? Where do they take you back? To the happy land. And It's true. It's so true. And I guess probably that would be the last thing I would say about this is back to my initial point of that being the first ska concert I went to at the Hollywood Palladium. I had been to Lollapalooza in 93 when I was, really young to see Pearl Jam. And what was the crowd filled with? Mosh pits. And that was my framework for what's going to happen when I go to a live show without seats, when it's just standing room only. Mm-hmm. This is what's going to happen. And the Aquabats opening up, what ends up happening? They started, I believe they started and ended the show with that song. And it's so cool because it's like a call to arms when you hear dun, bum, ba, da, 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 like you hear it and you go, oh, it's going to start. And then what ended up happening at the chorus is people did not mosh, but what did they do? They jumped up and down instead. Like, take me back to my, and yes. I was like, oh, this is different. This is different. And I was just so shocked. Again, it was just like another thing, like tying in my love for music and for guitar. And then now my love for horns. And then this crowd is doing something different. And they are at the forefront leading it. They're bringing us into this show. And then we all are just kind of jumping up and down in agreement. It was just amazing. So something different. Man. Yeah.
That's such a good, I mean, we're basically at an hour. I have like a million points I could go on, but I think that's a really good, like, final thought. The last thing I was thinking, which I'm just going to say, which you reminded me of, like, they started and ended the show with the same song, which is great. I do remember there was a few years ago, because like Real Big Fish has a lot of shtick in their act as well. And for a while there were a couple shows, I think it was when they were like, it was after Cheer Up had come out and they were kind of just looking to not be stuck on that record label anymore. They were playing shows, and of course everyone wants to hear Sell Out. So I forget what the order of the songs was, but they would do like Take On Me, Beer, something else, Sell Out, Beer, Take On Me, something else, Beer, Take On Me, Sell Out. They just kept doing the same songs like back and forth for the whole show. So they played each song like 3 times, which is like, it's one of those things where if you were at one of those shows, you know, it's either you'd be so mad because you're like, this is not what I'm here for, or it'd be hilarious because it's so ridiculous and like stupid. But speaking of crowds doing things different, this will be the last note that I bring up. I do remember the first time I went to a ska show, because there was the Aquabats, but then I think it was them with Real Big Fish or something, where there were the full horns and the whole thing. There were, I don't know if this is a common thing or it just happened there, but there were a couple guys like right behind me who were singing along with the horns.
That's me. Guilty.
Yeah, and it was so, I just remember in my ear, maybe it was you literally, but it was just remember like, ba, 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 and I was like, you're just making the trumpet sound. Okay. Like, I guess, what else do you do, you know? But it just cracked me up like so much because I don't know. I was like, I guess that's what you do when these are here. I've never been in this situation before.
Yeah. Really my most favorite, people don't like, I think one of your guests, I think, referenced, maybe, I don't think it was necessarily in a negative way, but Why Do They Rock So Hard? The third album from Real Big Fish. That's actually my favorite album because the horns are so killer on that album.
I love how polished that album is.
Yes. Oh my gosh. When that came out, I'm like, all right, this is their opus, I guess, because it's just so well done. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a big one. And well, whatever. Last points.
I know. We can go forever.
Because what I've been doing lately, specifically with Turn the Radio Off because of its anniversary, and then literally just yesterday with Why Do They Rock So Hard, is I've been diving into just the albums and not a mix list or a Spotify thing or whatever, but just like, I'm going to listen to this album the same way I used to, where I would just put in the CD and you listen to the whole thing, because you do like, it is, I forgot how different of an experience to listen to an entire album of work versus just a couple of songs here or there, a bunch of things, all your favorites just smashed together, but to go through and live like, you know, the pacing of this album, the way the songs are ordered, and the ride that you go on through it is like, oh my gosh, it's so different. And that's been really fun lately, is just to listen start to finish.
Apple kind of ruined that with the iTunes 99-cent single song thing, like where you just are just kind of a la carte picking what you like. There's a progression.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I love having, like, Spotify's daily mix or whatever is amazing. They know exactly what I need. I've been introduced to new stuff, but it's very different than hearing, like, you know, there are, especially on albums like that, there are songs where literally, like, you hear the song ending in the beginning of
floating
the
and transitioning into the next one. Of course, absolutely. You still hear the reverb of the guitar or something as it's moving into the next one. You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's really, really fun. And you kind of hear the story, like you mentioned, Fight Song, like on the Fury, you have, like, you know, 3 songs, 3 like really fast. I think it's like Super Rad Martian Girl, or no, it's Super Rad Red Sweater, Magic Chicken, and then I think it's Fight Song. So it's like crazy, and then here's It's very interesting. But anyway, I think what this proves is that I will have to have you back so we can continue just talking about whatever, because I had a ton of fun kind of going down these memory lanes here, and learning also from real musicians is a really fun thing for me to do.
I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Because we haven't mentioned this yet as far as some ska things. I'm just curious, you know, just like 6 months ago, ska documentary came out. Did you see it? It's called Pick It Up.
The one that was like the one that was narrated by Tim Armstrong.
Yes, I believe so. It's really good. You got.
I forget what it's called. No, because you had to, like, buy it on Vimeo, or I had to buy it.
Yep, I did.
Yeah. So funny story about that. I watched it.
I like buy you the copy. I'm like, you have to watch it.
No, I totally bought it. I loved it. I watched it. I have not finished the last 15 minutes, even though I started it whenever it came out, because like it's one of those things where, like, I don't want it to be over. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll finish it. So I haven't seen the last 15 minutes of it yet. But now it's been like a year or something or so. Yeah, but
it
it's
made me
great.
think about that, like, when you talked about the pay, because they talk a whole bunch about, like, the pay of, like, the bigger your band is, the harder it is to split up the money. So I made me think about that. But
yeah, I need to go finish that. That's gonna be my goal. Is but before the next episode of this show comes out, I will have finished that documentary finally. But Chris, thank you so much for hanging out today. If is there anything, if someone wants to connect with you, is there anything you want to direct people towards, or?
Sure. Yeah. The only thing I didn't really mention is one of the things I do as a side project, looking to make it more something new, is I've started a nonprofit with a licensed clinician. We work with the addicted population. So we have a podcast as well called The Recovery Junkies. It's on my little shirt right here. You can't really see it, but yeah, there you go. It's a bunch of us just kind of talking about, kind of concepts of wellness, as well as just kind of it can be for the addicted population. We all have stuff that we need to work on. We're not perfect people. And so that's kind of the stuff we talk about. Sometimes we delve into family of origin stories, or just why are things so hard, stuff like that. So it's really fun. It's a little more on the serious route as far as podcasts go, but you can find us at therecoveryjunkies.com, or you can get us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all those things like that. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things I'm doing. And we work outside of our podcast as well with people in person and in using Zoom and all things. And that's, of course, where I discovered you, Tom, was how we wanted to, of course, as you say, level up our audio and camera stuff. And that was really my introduction to you, as I was already doing some things. Then I started finding videos of people like you. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. So I guess I'm doing that right. And then I find more of your videos, because I'm like, well, if he knows how to do this and we're on the same page, well, I'm wondering, I don't know how to quite do this. Let's see if I can find that. And that's kind of where we find those communities, throughout the pandemic, because we had to move all of our support groups that we led to virtually, and now we're looking to kind of build a bigger brand to do things more kind of across virtual stuff, even with things going back to quote normal, so to speak. But yeah, so therecoveryjunkies.com. Thanks so much.
That's cool. I'm so glad. It's so cool to hear you doing something so positive for so many people. So definitely check that out. That's right up my alley for sure. So thanks so much, Chris. I'll put all the links and everything in the show notes. And thank you so much too for everybody else for being here, for listening, for being part of this journey. As we figure it out, I'm having a ton of fun, so I hope you are too. I appreciate you spending your time with me, and I guess that's it. I don't have a way of ending the show, so I'll see you next time.